Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're based in the world. I'm Alethea and I'm PADA's Youth Ambassador, and today we're doing a fireside chat with Miss Norie Quintos. And we're very happy to have Norie with us. She's all the way based in America, Washington, DC. So it's actually evening for her over there, and we're so glad that she can join us today. Norie Quintos is a consultant for the travel industry on communication strategy, media relations, custom content, and messaging. She helps destinations and travel companies find and tell their stories through communication audits, seminars, training, coaching, and print and pixel projects. She is an award-winning journalist. She is an editor at large for the National Geographic Travel Media, contributing content and representing that iconic brand. She's spoken at many conferences, and her interest areas are cultural tourism, indigenous tourism, sustainable tourism, and transformational travel. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we welcome Ms. Norie Quintos to the stage. Norie, are you here with us?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Alethea.
Hi.
It's nice to thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are really happy to have you here today because it's been so many of our childhood dreams to actually travel the world as a journalist and write about our travels. Not just mine, but my colleagues as well, who is helping me with tech setup. She shared with me that that's her childhood dream as well. And today we have a PADA Youth co-host. Her name is Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, are you there? Can you turn on your video and audio? Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Okita. I am from the Bandung Institute of Tourism student chapter, and right now I'm traveling to travel and tourism. So today I'm so excited to co-hosting Ale to have a chat with Ms. Norie. So should we now go to the first question?
Yes, let's get this fireside chat started. I was going to say party, but it's 9 a.m. for me right now. It doesn't feel like party vibes, but fireside chat, let's do it.
All right. So, Ms. Norie, my first question would be, you've mentioned before that you originally wanted to work for the UN, but instead you become the travel editor. So actually what inspired you to start this path?
So yes, as a child, so I grew up very bicultural. I actually spent my childhood in the Philippines. And then when I was 12, my family moved to the United States. And so I grew up with these two different, very different cultures. And so cultural engagement and cross-cultural exchange was always so important to me. And so as I grew up, I thought that I would become, work as a diplomat. And working in the UN was kind of my grand dream. After college, it ended up that I was looking at some travel magazines, and I thought, well, maybe this is an interesting way to go. And I'd taken some journalism classes at university. So the path kind of changed that way, and it's been a great path, but really I am still motivated by the same things that I was as a youth. And that's this idea of connecting the world and promoting peace through cultural exchange. The more we understand each other, I think the more fulfilled that we are, and that can come out in a travel magazine and an article, as well as obviously in world peace.
I see. So, Ms. Norie, so if I came from a country where English is my first language, I feel that it's kind of problem for me to become travel journalist because there's a lot of things I need to learn, especially about the language. So do you have any advice for me? What should I do with this language problem?
So, obviously travel journalism has to do being a journalist and being a writer. is at its core being able to manipulate a language skillfully. So there's really no getting around, you know, having skills in manipulating a language, in a language that you want to write in, whether that's English or whether that's another language. So you really can't get around that. But the good news, there are a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. One is that English is not, well, English is probably the lingua franca of the world. That is, you know, I see that changing, and there are many publications, many outlets that do not write in English. For National Geographic Traveler, for example, has 15 local language editions. And the ones that I can think of right now, there's a Chinese edition that's written in Chinese and also edited in Chinese. So it's a local language office. Korea has one as well. And there's also a Latin America edition, for example. So English is not absolutely necessary, although obviously if you do want to write in English, having a good, being able to manage the language well is really part of being a writer. The other thing I wanted to mention, however, is that is changing. There's a different perspective that's being looked for these days. Travel writing obviously started back in the 1800s, and it's a very Western, male, white centric, you know, it's been centered around that for many, many years, starting from its beginnings. But we're seeing that change quite a bit now. And so there is really much more of an interest in seeing other perspectives, in Native perspectives, in Indigenous perspectives, in community perspectives, in perspectives from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so I think that's a really exciting turn of events. And it means that outlets are starting to look beyond the regular bubbles to seek other kinds of voices. So I think that presents an opportunity for other voices to come into the picture, whether that's non-English speakers, whether that's from other countries, whether that's youth, whether that's from different socioeconomic backgrounds. I'm just so excited about it because I think that just enriches the field.
That's really interesting because it's about cherishing your unique point of view, right? I think my follow-up question to that would be, how do I find my voice? How do I find what is my unique perspective that sets me apart from others? Sometimes it's a little bit hard because I feel like everyone's the same and I'm not special in any way. So how can I find my voice?
I do think it comes kind of from within. And I also think it comes from having some confidence about what do you think? What do you believe? What are your interests? I mean, just as we are all individually, we are all individuals, what is it that makes you individual? And I know it can be a little hard for youth. I coach high school students in writing their college essays sometimes and helping them find their story. And it's hard to find your story when you're young because it takes a while to build up experiences and all of that. But, just be aware of what those experiences are. And remember that what makes you different is what makes you unique. And that helps to start to define what your own voice is. And again, these days, different perspectives, different voices are much more valued than they were in the past. So make sure you learn to find what your unique voice is.
Thank you. That's really comforting advice, that it just takes a little bit of time to find ourselves. Yeah. Elizabeth and I have a few questions specifically about travel writing and travel journalism and editing. So Elizabeth, do you want to ask your question?
Okay, so I think I start with quite a heavy question. So now I will move on to the easier question, ma'am. So what's your favorite part about your job? Is there anything that you hate about the travel journalism?
Yeah, so let's start with what I love about my job. And that is that I am always learning. I always was somebody that loved to be in school, and here I get to keep learning and be compensated for it. So, and I obviously love the travel portion of it. I love seeing the different cultures and meeting all kinds of people. And again, that also goes back to learning. And then the other part of learning, that the fact that I'm always learning, is that I also get to share what I have learned with everybody else, and get them excited about the things that I've learned. So it does double duty. It's not just that I'm learning, it's that I'm also sharing the things that I've learned in my travels. What I hate about the job? Well, I don't love being on a plane very much, especially these days. Not that I can get on a plane at the moment, but even when I do, I just think that that type of transportation is just going to get worse, and that experience is not going to get any easier. And the other thing is that it can be hard to make a living out of being a travel journalist. It is, there's so many changes. Journalists are not paid what they used to be paid, nor are they paid what they should be paid. And so a lot of the travel journalists that I know really struggle and really have to find different ways to make a living. So that can be hard, because it's not a typical, most travel journalists do not typically have one boss and a one paycheck, and they get to do that. That is quite rare these days, and getting rarer. So they have to find different ways different income streams to make things, the kind of lifestyle and the kind of work that they want to do, how to make that work. So that's the not so fun part of the job.
Yeah, I think finances and do a lot of travel journalists then freelancers?
An increasing number of travel journalists are freelancers. That didn't used to be the case, when I started in the business many years ago, a couple decades or more. But yes, these days I would say that a majority are in business for themselves and doing freelance.
Yeah, and freelancing is really a type of lifestyle that's not for everyone, I must say. But it does give you that sense of freedom to be able to pick and choose and control your own life.
It's definitely good in some ways and not so great in some ways. But I do think that the future of work is this kind of economy. So I hope, and I'm quite confident, that things will change for the better, that our governments will support this kind of very honest work. And certainly on the good side, it gives you a lot of freedom, working remotely, being a digital nomad, working in different places. I think that's probably and taking time off, for example, as well, and being able to adjust your hours depending on your lifestyle and your needs and your responsibilities, and not having a boss, I'm my own boss, and that can be really nice.
I see. So, speaking about being original, ma'am, when people read travel articles, I assume they want to learn new information about what to expect when they go to some place. So, how do I balance creating the mood for my writing without neglecting the important facts, instruction, or any useful information about the destination itself?
That's a great question. In travel writing and travel journalism, there are many types of stories, but essentially I'll talk about a couple of different basic types of story. And one is the narrative, where it's really much more story based. There's a beginning, there's an end, there's some drama perhaps. So that's the narrative, where it's really more of a storytelling angle. And the other basic type of travel story is more, we call it service journalism, or a service story, where it's really trying to share and communicate facts and suggestions and tips and information, basic factual information about a destination. So stories can be all of one or all of another, or a combination of both. And it really depends on the outlet and your editor, where that kind of a story fits. So my suggestion really is, now different people have preferences. At different times in my life, I've wanted to write more narrative. At other times in my life, I've wanted to write more service. And so it depends on what your interests are, and it also depends on what your outlet is looking for. If your outlet is looking for a basic service piece with good, solid information, and you deliver a beautiful narrative piece about, a transformation you had in your travels, that's not going to work. So there has to be some sort of connection between what you want to write and what the outlet wants to publish. So that needs to be combined.
I see. Thank you for your advice. So within your experience, have you dealt with the writer's block?
I'm sorry? Oh, writer's block. Yes. All the time. There's not one writer I know who has not dealt with writer's block.
Yeah.
And, my mistake is that I always go into the refrigerator to look for the word that I'm looking for, or the inspiration. And I'll tell you, it doesn't work, but it never fails. I still do it every time. I think every writer I know has a different way of handling writer's block. And writer's block really is it's this inability to get started. It's feeling kind of like a phony, like, am I really a writer? I don't think I can write. Maybe I wrote yesterday, but I can't ever write again. It's that very difficult feeling to deal with. But again, it's universal. Really, the best way to handle it that I've heard and that I do sometimes use is to have a change of scenery, do something different, go out for a walk, go take a shower, take some time where you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and let your mind kind of clear out. And that's often the time that I actually get the most inspired. All of a sudden, when I'm doing something else, I remember, wow, here's a great line, or here's a great combination of words that I have been struggling with, and I just wasn't able to put together. So it takes time. It takes a different place in your head. And also if you can try to take the stress away, which is hard because you're trying to work, but if you can, any way you can take the stress away, can be really helpful.
Okay, thank you. Because I think usually when I write and I get a writer's block, I'm getting so stressed because I cannot continue the words. And I think your advice is very good for people out there who, like me, who try to find the right phrase for the right writings.
Yeah, the weird thing is the answer really is in not thinking about it, which is weird. It goes against everything because that's what you're trying to do, but actually doing something different is usually the way to go. And again, remembering that every writer struggles with this kind of thing, even the most famous and the most well-known writers. The other thing that most writers struggle with is this sense of, am I really a writer? If I can't write right now, am I really a writer? Yeah. And it's a struggle that most creative people have, is this, because creativity can come from such a weird place. Like, where does it even come from? It's not always, where does my creativity come? Where do these ideas come from? And so there's always this feeling sometimes that, okay, well, it came to me, but will it come to me again? Will I be able to do the same thing that I have done in the past? Because I don't quite know how it all came together, but it somehow did. But can I do it again? So that certainly is a struggle that every creative person that I'm familiar with has faced.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I 100% agree as well, because it's kind of that phrase where you're kind of like, you oh, it's not coming to me right now. I'm experiencing a block right now. So yeah, no, but everyone really has felt it and felt that sense of like, I don't know what I did in the past that was successful that I can now pull it off again and again and again. Yeah. And I think like for the youth who are kind of like feeling their way around, I think one thing is also just try, just push yourself a little bit and just try to do things that are a little bit out of your comfort zone.
I think that's such good advice. You know, if I knew then what I know now, I would have been so much more relaxed living through my my younger days. But if I can give the youth any advice, it's that just take the next step. Don't think so far ahead, and don't think this is what I want to be and it seems so impossible. And you are in a year now that is just, the whole world has stopped essentially. It's been hit a huge blow, and I do feel for the youth who are kind of stopped in their tracks at the moment, and who had, you know, who you might have felt that there's your momentum has been stopped, and you know you'll never get that back, and because it can be. But you know, having seen through several of these kinds of events, worldwide events, you know, never this exact event, but I've been through a lot of different things and seeing, you know, it will pass, it will move on, and it is surprising. It sometimes surprises me what I've achieved, feeling as if I didn't really know how it happened. And so my advice is to just look at, okay, what's the next appropriate step for me, and then go for that, and then, you know, have the next one after that, you know, with an idea of like where you think you want to go, perhaps, you know, as your guiding North Star. It's always good to have that, but never try to plan so far ahead. Those, you know, it's impossible to know what's going to happen, you know, way down the line. However, you can start to look at what's happening intermediate. So what's the next appropriate step that may lead me into this, in this general direction? That's really all you can do. And I think that's enough. And you will be surprised when you look back and think, wow, I did all that.
The phrase I was looking for previously was imposter syndrome, which is
yes.
Which is a phrase that my generation, the millennial generation, loves to use because we all feel like imposters in one way or another.
Well, I have news for you in that I have imposter syndrome all the time still, and I sometimes wonder, you know, goodness, it's hard to imagine. And I am no different than where you are sitting now. That, you know, where you are sitting now could have been me that many years ago. And you have the whole world ahead of you, which is exciting, but it's also quite scary and can be quite paralyzing. So again, I would recommend just looking at the next step and seeing what that might be.
You mentioned this guiding North Star, and I wanted to kind of ask the question about travel and what youth need to do to secure the future of travel, simply because you've traveled so much, you've seen so much, and you've experienced it for yourself. So a lot of Pada youth, especially, we're so passionate about changing the world for the better. We're so passionate about developing the tourism industry in a more responsible, more sustainable way. But there are so many ways to go about doing this. So what do you think we should do to secure the future? What do you think we should focus on? Should we focus on innovation, sustainability, world peace? What could you give us some advice and thoughts from your years of travel?
Yes, unfortunately, it does fall to your generation to fix the problems that my generation and the previous generations have been unable to effectively fix. So it does fall on you, and everything you mentioned there does need to be a focus. Now, the good news is that while together, you do need to focus on world peace, innovation, sustainability, deforestation, climate change. Yes, while all of that needs to be focuses, foci, each of you individually doesn't have to address all of those, huge issues. Each of you individually can choose what you are most drawn to, the area that you are most drawn to, and work on that. So while yes, all of those are important issues to face as a whole, individually, you don't have to face, you don't have to do everything all at once and all together. So that's on the one side. The other thing that I'd like to mention is that every issue that you have raised there, they're all connected to each other. And so fixing one of those or moving towards addressing one of those also affects and addresses the others. So if you can deal with climate change, that actually helps, that helps, hunger and poverty, and poverty connects with inequality, and inequality connects with deforestation, and deforestation connects with, so many other things that, and so all of those problems that you raise are actually all connected. And so addressing one is actually addressing them all. So yes, it's all in your hands, but I'm quite confident in your generation's passion, skills, and abilities to, you're more than up to the task.
Elizabeth, how do you feel now that Norie has given your generation and you this stamp of approval?
It's some kind of a challenging for me. It's like, turns out there's a lot of things that we can do, but we don't realize it yet. We always think that writing, most of us always think that writing is just about sharing about what you're thinking, but actually it has a bigger impact for people around you, for the world itself. So I think it's very important for us to try to see our travel writing from different perspectives, because it's like help us to widen our perspective itself about the world, I think.
And I would argue that travel writing can be a very good tool. I mean, it's not the only tool, but it can be a very good tool in advocating and explaining and informing and educating on certain kinds of issues. Because again, if you're writing from your perspective, then you have a certain kind of audience, and that certain kind of audience who reads you can learn from the things that you've learned. So it's really a way to disseminate and spread good information. And so I would argue that responsible travel writing is vital in this next, as we reopen up. How can you write responsibly? Because the way you travel and the way you write, people read. I mean, you're not a regular traveler in the sense that what you do is individual. What you do and what you write about, people read and may follow. And so I do think that travel writers should step up and accept more responsibility in how to travel, in researching travel and understanding the best and least negative ways to travel and the most positive ways to travel, and then share that with their different audiences.
Could you give us like some tips and tricks on how to be a responsible travel writer? Is it about research, doing your research? Is it about talking to people? Could you share a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, I think those are two things, Ali, that you mentioned are two very important things. Researching is such an important part of travel writing, and I don't know that it's done that well often, but yes, you should do the research, because what you write about ends up being followed by people. So it's important to shine the light on good ways of travel. And doing the research is very important to that. So research is very, very important, making sure that you are surfacing and putting the spotlight on positive ways of traveling, and perhaps not shining the spotlight on negative ways of traveling. You know, if you have and obviously journalism can include photography as well, but and a picture is very, very powerful. So if you were a travel writer, if you know, as a travel writer, I tried not to have a photo, well, I wouldn't even be in that situation, but I wouldn't want a photo of me, you know, petting a wild animal, you know, because that is not a good way of travel. That is not a positive thing for the planet or for animals. And so, you know, feeding wild animals is not something that you will ever see from you know, from my social feeds. And I would also probably try to write about that and explain why, you know, what the connections are that make that not a good thing to do. And the same goes for, you know, again, it's promoting a good way of travel and then explaining why that is to help travelers who are on vacation. And you can't really expect them to do all the research that you do, because remember, you're working, they're vacationing, but for you it's work. I mean, it can be really fun and gratifying work, but it is work. And so you want to do the work so that a traveler can follow in your footsteps and have a positive impact, but it shouldn't feel like work for them. They shouldn't have to do all the research. They shouldn't have to figure out why. You know, you should be telling them why they shouldn't be petting wild animals, and they should, you know, so they get to read it, and then they just get to follow your good footsteps. And so that's the point. That's what we want to have happen. So your generation, and you as a travel writer, you as a traveler who puts out information is very, very, very important. So doing it responsibly is vital.
Thank you for that. Thank you for those tips and tricks. And I particularly like that point when you said you are working, they are on holiday. Like,
yes,
it's so different, and we don't realize it. Like, I didn't think of it that way, and I just realized it when you said it that way. So thank you. We are actually going to slowly shift into the Q&A section from the audience. So our audience, wherever you are in the world, please introduce yourself, use the Q&A function down below to ask your questions to Norie. This is a rare opportunity to ask her anything you want to ask. And so while your questions kind of stream in, Elizabeth, do you want to share with us your favorite quotes? Because all three of us here, we love reading, we love writing, we love the written word. So we were going to share about our favorite quotes and ask Norie what hers is. But Elizabeth, please share yours first.
Okay, thank you, Ali. So Norie, my favorite question is from The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. It is, "The world isn't in your books and maps, it's out there." I think it's really comfort me to keep traveling. So do you have any favorite quote that keeps you keep traveling?
Yeah, well, I like that quote that you have, because I think it does show that you can't just let the world happen passively. You actually have to engage in the world. I think that's what that quote tells me, that you really have to throw yourself in something. You know, obviously it should be positive, but yes, I love that quote. So my quote is by Wendell Berry, and it is, "The earth is what we all have in common." And I think we, as travelers, we sometimes forget that, because, you know I travel because I want to see different things. I want to, you know, have my senses be assaulted by new smells, new sights, new sounds, and all of that. So I often think of the world as like such a different place, but really the flavors are different. But I'm always struck when I travel that in the end, our humanity is is the same, and that we are all brothers and sisters in this world together. And so I'm struck by that again and again. And this quote essentially reminds us that yes, we are all, we are all connected, and in the end, we're what we have in common. And again, not just the people, but we all live on this one planet this is our home. And so we should be taking as good care of our home as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're like hobbits, Sometimes we are like comfortable things. We're too comfortable with our world, so we forgot that traveling is important to open up our minds. And we're being too comfortable with our places and our routines.
Yeah, I agree. And I've always felt that travel makes you think. In fact, my blog is actually called Travel Makes You Think. But what's interesting is that not traveling, which I've done in the last 4 months, also makes you think. And so I've really come away with some really interesting insights from not traveling. And part of that is taking the approach of looking at my backyard, or not necessarily literally my backyard, but what's around me, where I can be, and having the mindset of a traveler and exploring it like a traveler. And that really has opened my mind quite a lot. So not traveling also makes you think if you have that traveler's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool when you bring that traveler's perspective to your own like everyday environment, because you see it in a new way, you see it in a magical way. And that's kind of what, for example, films like Studio Ghibli do for me, right? Because they translate this everyday normal environment into something that's magical. And yeah, that's traveling as well.
It reminds me of a question that I get a lot from people. I can't afford to travel. I want to be a travel writer, but I can't afford to travel. How do I do that? How can I write? Because traveling is not something I either have the time or the ability to do. And really, what I say is to look at your own backyard and be a traveler in your own city, be a traveler in your own country. And that's where you start. And that actually is where you have to start. And so it is very possible. And in fact, that really is the best training ground, because if you can look at your own backyard with those magical eyes where things seem like magic, those are the skills, and those are the skills that you have to hone when you are a traveler. And doing that, practicing that in your own backyard is really, those are the senses, like, okay, oh, that's a little bit different here. What would somebody think of this? Those are the skills that you need anyway. So I don't like that excuse. I don't have the money or the time to travel. Yeah. You don't have to. You actually need to start where you are. And if you can see the world with that perspective of being an explorer, okay, well then that's what's going to get you out of there and seeing the rest of the world with those eyes. But if you don't have those eyes for your own backyard, then it's really not going to be helpful to you later.
Speaking of skills that you need as a travel journalist, someone has asked a really good question, but anonymously. So as a non-local to destinations that you visit, how do you balance your outsider's bias with local values and norms in your writing?
I love that question. That's a great question, because there is so much of this helicopter travel writing where you take a Western person, you plop them into, some place that they're not familiar with, and then they write about everything they see. And luckily, I'm so grateful to say that is starting to come out of fashion. This type of Western perspective travel writing. And that's where you get into trouble, because if somebody local reads it, they think, oh my gosh, that's what they picked. And so it can be quite problematic. And I think it is one of, it's a very valid argument and complaint about the way travel writing is, because you see such horrible examples of that kind of helicopter, you land and then, you write nonsense basically about travel. And so I love that question. Thank you for bringing that up, whoever put that up. How do you avoid that? Well, doing your homework. Again, working and not just being, experiencing anything without doing any research. So working, talking to as many, and not just your guide, I see so many travel writers that are quoting their guides all the time. And, guides are good in that they're trained and all of that. But please talk to as many non-guides, talk to as many people that you can encounter and find out their perspectives and share those perspectives. If you don't have that yourself, talk to a lot of people and synthesize those voices and to get a broader perspective of what of your experience. Great question.
Elizabeth, do you want to choose a question from the Q&A?
Yeah, thank you. So I really like this question. As we take the first step into travel from the pandemic, should we follow established footsteps or take the road less traveled?
Always take the road less traveled, as long as it's kind of a positive road. Yes, so this pandemic has thrown a wrench on everything, not just travel, obviously, right? And so it's unclear as we reopen what things are going to look like. However, I would argue that we shouldn't just go back to normal, that we should take this opportunity to, and not just travel writers, but really, destinations, governments, non-governmental organizations, people. We need to take this and gain some insights without diminishing, how horrible this pandemic has been and how unfairly horrible it's been to some people. If we can take advantage of what the time and use it to do something different, write differently, learn differently, travel differently, accept travelers, change the way tourism has always been done. Use this as a chance to do something different. I would agree to try to do something different is a good thing. What that is, I don't really quite know, but
yeah, I do think it's a rare opportunity that the pandemic has given us to kind of redo and rebuild in a better way than what we've done. So like, no more over-tourism, right? Because now we all have to socially distance, so over-tourism is not gonna be included in the new normal. Yeah.
Well, I hope not, but we certainly, we had over-tourism before. We have no tourism right now, but as we build back up, will we end up back in the place that we started from? I think we have this amazing opportunity not to do that. So how do we build back tourism in a way that it doesn't impact on the fragility of destinations, of cultures, and all of that? So yes, I hope we don't go back to normal. I hope we have a different kind of normal that's positive, and in a way that where everybody thrives, whereas the destinations are thriving, where the travelers are thriving, and it's a good and not just balance, but I actually think it's more of an integrated whole where it becomes less of a transaction and more of a host and guest relationship. Because if we can think of travel less as a money handed over, less transactionally and more like you would a host and a guest. Most hosts, how to act when you're a host, and how to act or how you should act as a guest. And if we can think of that if we can move forward with that as travel, then I think we could all thrive, because in the end, it usually works out that way.
Thank you. There is one question that I've been eyeing, and this will be our last question today because we've run out of time. So Imol Joshi, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrongly, but he asked, are there any digital platforms for prospective travel writers to connect with fellow writers and exchange thoughts and ideas? I think it's asking for an online community. Does that already exist? Where is it? Where can we find it to kind of connect with each other and encourage each other and continue this conversation? Because this conversation has been great. And there are so many other questions I want to ask you, but time constraints. So yeah.
Yes, there are many communities. What they are, I can't pull out of my head at the moment, but the great thing about technology today is that there are so many communities, and there are so many, there are tourism communities, there are sustainable tourism communities, and these are all digital, by the way. So there are youth communities, there are communities that combine all of this, and it is all out there. I can't pull out their names at the moment. I'm sorry. Maybe that could be an interesting homework, work that we could do, because I do think that would be really helpful. But there are great communities out there where you can exchange information, you can share, you can inspire each other, you can motivate each other, and no, there are.
I will say Para Youth, which is the community I take care of, is a community for people who are passionate about travel. So whether you're as a traveler, or you're passionate for it as your profession, or you're passionate about it because you want to write about it, Para Youth is the place to be.
All right, well, let's definitely start there. There you go.
Yeah, so we are one like international community that really covers a lot of different knowledge bases, and we talk to different industry leaders like Norie. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, Norie and Elizabeth, for today's conversation. It has been such a great conversation. Slides, please. So I think I've learned so much from just being able to speak to you, Norie, and I just thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Alethea and Elizabeth. It was so fun to chat with you, and you don't know how inspired I am. You know, if you're an example, if you're representatives of the future, the future of travel, then I think it's in great hands, and I'm so excited, and I feel so much better about the future of tourism because of this conversation that we've had. So no, thank you. Thanks to you.
Norie, you've melted my heart. Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you so much, Norie and Ellie, for this chance for me and for the insights. And it's such a biggest pleasure for me to came here and help to sound the mind of our younger generation.
Yeah. So to round up, this is my email address. If anyone has more questions or would like to join the community, please come and talk to me on email. I'm happy to talk to everyone. And of course, this fireside chat was possible because it's part of the Dream to Travel Festival that's happening today, right now. And it's been happening for a few weeks already. And later today, we are going to have a live game session where you can win really cool prizes. This week it is sponsored by the Nepal Tourism Board, and you'll get to play with us, take a break from your everyday routine, and just kind of get to know the community. That's happening later today at 1:30 p.m. So go to our website, dreamtotravel.para.org, and join us on the games and giveaway. We also have up next a live experience. So they're going to bring us to the birthplace of Lord Buddha. And this is once again in Nepal. So everyone who hasn't gone to Nepal and wants to go to Nepal, this is your chance to go during the live experience at 2:30 p.m. So up next, also for Para Youth, we spoke a lot today about cross-cultural understanding and using travel writing as a tool to tell stories about cultures and better understand people in order to increase empathy and increase understanding and increase peace in this world. So next week, I'm very excited to announce that the youths of Para Youth are going to lead you on a backpacking adventure around the world. We're going to go to so many different, seven different locations around Asia Pacific, and the youths themselves are going to do a cultural presentation and bring you on a one-day itinerary to show you their hometown. So I'm really excited for that. The youth are super creative, and they're going to do this they're going to do this thing where they tell stories about their hometown and bring you and show you the local hidden gems. So please join us next week, Wednesday at 11 a.m. Bangkok time. With that, thank you very much once again, Norie and Elizabeth. This has been absolutely lovely talking to you guys. And bye.
Bye, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.